Up next is Balbir Sidhu and Brad McQuhae from Konig Brewing Systems, who will be talking about Konig's approach to equipment, innovation, and manufacturing.
You're live. Okay,
All right. Here, I'm Brad McQuhae and
Balbir Sidhu.
Balbir Sidhu, and we're co-owners of Konig Brewing Systems. It's actually Sidmac Engineering Manufacturing Incorporated. We started the manufacturing company and then came up with the brand second. But our background jointly was with a company I started 30 years ago. I started a company called Newland Systems, ran that up until 2016, and bowed out of that, and Balbir carried on until that company folded. So we picked up the ashes and started back up doing what we've done for the last 3 decades. And I started as a brewer back in the early days in 1984 in the craft brewing industry. So I've been at this some time now. Met a lot of people, done a lot of things. I've enjoyed myself immensely. Tried to retire and gave up on that idea and decided to continue on. It was just too much fun. And anyway, I'll let Balbir just talk a little bit about himself here.
Yeah, once again, Balbir Sidhu. My background is mechanical engineering. So shortly after graduating university, I actually had joined Newlands, where I basically was involved in all the design aspects, and mostly in the brewing side, but we did get into a lot of other process industries as well, beverage and food as well. So yeah, with Newlands all the way up to the end, I kind of stayed on board until it did fold, and then pretty much on that day, I knew obviously the markets were so good, and what we were doing and what we had built for that brand. It was sort of a shame at what happened, but I sort of called Brad up the next day and saying, we need to continue doing this, and that's what we did. So I have about, let's say, 26 years experience doing this in terms of engineering and design of process equipment. And like I said, mostly breweries and distilleries. So, and now with Konig, basically, we're the same people, but new brand that we're launching. And so far, we've had a very successful start with this. People in the industry know who we are, know of us, and what we have done in the past. So it's been good. And continue to move forward with this and help and serve all the brewers out there.
That's true. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, though, is some people out there will think the craft industry is, 15 years old or something like that. And like I said, I started in '84, and there wasn't a lot of people in this industry, but it was starting. It had started at that time. It started before that. I mean, Ken Grossman with Sierra Nevada was, I think, '78 or something like that, and even before him. In San Francisco, Fritz Maytag had Anchor Brewing, and we would call that a craft brewery today. I don't know if that was considered that back then. And then a little while later, New Belgium started up. I'd met Jim Cook's dad actually in 1984, or 84, 85, and he was telling me about his son starting something up, and that turned out to be Jim. And I'd met Jim way back then as well. So, the craft industry took off in the early 90s, and we saw tremendous growth in the early 90s, and a lot of brew pubs, some craft breweries. The equipment then was very, very simple, and budgets were very small. It wasn't unusual for us to have a complete 10-barrel brewing system. This is fermenters and brights or storage tanks. 2-vessel brew house, things like that. It'd be around 120 to 150,000. $150,000. The budgets weren't very big, so the equipment was fairly simplistic, and we've progressed. Towards the end of the '90s, everything collapsed, and then there was a lot of used equipment on the market. And as a manufacturer, that really kicked us in the teeth. We were going from 4 brew houses a month to maybe 6 in a year. And of course, as a stainless fabricator, we got involved in other things as well, not just brewing. But we hung in there because that's my background and that's my passion, was the beer side. And I've been judging at the JBF and other events since about '92. But we stuck it out, and then things started to pick up through the 2000s. We saw an uptick actually as early as 2004, 2005, and then every year was a little more interest. You'd read a little more in the magazines and things like that, and before you know it, this became a legitimate industry, and so that's where we are today. It's somewhat of a mature industry. I wouldn't classify it as fully matured yet, but obviously there's going to be a shakeout with this COVID thing, and some things are going to happen. But it leads me into my next topic, and that's really on the innovation side of things within our craft industry. And there hasn't been a lot of innovation. I think that we were one of the few to actually spend the money in trying to come up with new ideas or new ways of doing things. And it's unfortunate, most of the innovation we've seen has come from overseas, overseas meaning Europe, not the other direction, mostly out of the European side. And however, we did work on a number of things. And what comes to mind though is, why innovate at all? That's the question that needs to be asked, and then the other one is, why not? It takes knowledge and imagination when you innovate, and I think we had an overabundance of that. We've had a lot of people with some great ideas. We've done some great things. Usually, what happens, and I think I'm talking too much. I should let Balbir talk. Usually, what happens is somebody has a problem, and there's lots of examples of that. There's usually a problem somewhere in a brewery, and it'll take either someone at the brewery to get someone else, some fabricator, to make something that helps them with their problem. And a good example would be, the hop dosing that has gone on over the last 15 years or so, where more and more hops have been added, both in the kettle and at the whirlpool, and then also in the fermenter, the dry hopping side of things. I mean, years ago when we dry hop, we used to just use whole hops in bags and put them in tanks and things like that. So, it's easy to remove the hops, but then later people were using pellets and pouring them in, and more and more and more and more. And so that led to various methods of hop dosing. And there is, we developed a couple, and we did some R&D work on stuff like that. But I some of the first ones I saw were actually out of Europe, and not, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it was out of here. And so, that's an example of some innovation. The other innovation also is with the high hopping rates. There are other methods of extraction in the whirlpool, because as most people know, when you're having high hop rates in a whirlpool, you got lots of green mass in there, and most don't realize that the whirlpool was never designed for those kind of hopping rates. I mean, when I look back, it was a fellow that worked at Molson's in Canada, I think it was Montreal, that came up with the whirlpool design, and then wrote a paper in the MBAA, or a few papers on it. And it was adopted very quickly. It was surprising how quickly it was adopted throughout the industry. Up until then, they had settling tanks and did other things, but the whirlpool was kind of a new innovation. And the hopping rates back then were, around 80 to 100 grams per hectoliter. They weren't pounds per barrel, and so it was very small amount used. And so it worked quite well. You fast forward today, where we're talking, pounds or kilograms per hectoliter. It was never designed to do that. So what that has led to, though, are different methods used in designing whirlpools. Some are just simply bigger diameters, but others have multiple troughs, and quite a few other things. And again, that's kind of the innovation path that we've seen happen here. The other thing is innovating for safety. And it might sound a little bit odd, but there is a big emphasis on safety in a brewery now. People are OSHA, and up in Canada as well. There's that equivalent, and that's usually local. That's in provincial. They're more aware of the hazards in breweries and are clamping down on breweries to, have and follow safety procedures in a brewery. But the innovation can also come from things like, how do you stop something from rotating quite quickly? Not just an e-stop, but also things like putting limit switches in or proxy switches, which we've done over the years on manways, which on the European stuff, most of that, those larger breweries and also in the professional breweries, you would see that sort of thing. And, we've done other things. Jump in anytime, Balbir.
You have to give me a break. Yeah, in terms of, we're talking manufacturing as a manufacturer, keeping up with different demands. I mean, I think a lot of our innovation or changes to our designs came from the feedback from our, the brewers, so that the different type of recipes that we used, like the IPAs and the demand for using the high hop loading, that actually, as a manufacturer, changed our designs so that we could, fulfill the requirements of our customer. So our designs have never, like I said, I've been 25 years designing equipment. Those designs, I can't say we've been able to standardize them because over that time, they have evolved. And sometimes there were great improvements in terms of innovative ideas, but other times it's just to evolve with what was needed out of the market. Like Whirlpool is a good example, or actually most of our things, even including the lauter tun, if I look 20 years back, the size of the lauter tun for a particular batch brewery compared to now, it is much bigger. So there's those kind of just general changes that have happened just over time and based on what the market wants. But also in terms of, they are more sophisticated, safety being one of them, is, the sizes of the systems have gone from small to large, and as you get bigger, you can't be doing manual things, so there's a lot more automation involved. And that's to reduce some of the labor, and we'll also get into some of the automation and controls to reduce water usage and wastewater. So a lot of these things have evolved over time, so yeah, I think what's our next part here was we were talking about the safety. So yeah, interlocking of manways and other things so that steam turns off. Same thing with drives and agitators. Confined space is also a big, before it used to be us as a manufacturer, we were always dealt with that because when we're manufacturing equipment, confined space was always a big issue. But now, even for the breweries, as OSHA and WorkSafe BC here have, are leaning on that a bit more, confined space is a big issue even for the breweries in production. So just different ways of people being able to get in and out, and as a manufacturer, us making it easier and putting the safety things in place so that OSHA and everything, you're compliant and everything.
Or in some cases, so we don't have to get into a tank to service something.
That's right.
Like an example is a lot of competitors I've seen, just as an example, on a uni tank, they'll run a CIP line up in at the top of the tank and fuse it in place. And if you're spray ball plugs, you actually have to get in and take it off and put a new one in, which is not necessarily a big deal, but that is a confined space. And we standardized a long time ago on having a TC ferrule on the top, so you can just pull that out externally, so you don't have to get into the tank to do that. And it's not a big thing, but it's it is just one of those things that necessity is the kind of the mother of invention there, and that's what we ran into. And one of the other innovative things that Balbir sort of hit on, or maybe skirted even, was on the energy saving side, which leads to environmental, and so we're more and more brewers are heading in that direction, and I would say led by the likes of Sierra Nevada Brewing and New Belgium and others. They're not the only ones, but others as well, and on trying to lessen their carbon footprint in things like we worked with a European guy who developed a wort boiling system as an example that can save a significant amount of energy, in the form of steam, used to heat a kettle. And so we can do DMS reduction, DMS precursors, and with maybe 2%, 2 to 3% evaporation, maybe even a maximum of 4, but 2% is very doable, and also in less time. And it's through a rectification system, and it's pumped and things like that. And we've built those. Not everybody goes for that, but it can cut down your boil time. It can cut down on your energy consumption, and it saves you money there. But also, if you think of it, if you're not burning up more fuel to make steam, you're also, it's a little better for the environment. And so those are things these are constants. These are constants that we work on all the time. How can we do something different? How can we do it better? And unfortunately, our industry, there's just not a lot of people doing this here in North America. So we often feel like we're alone. But we do try to partner with brewers that have good ideas and work on some things.
Yeah, I guess a couple of the other innovative things that you mentioned, the rectification is yeast propagation. I know you talked about hop dosing, and so that again, it ties in safety as well as innovates a new product. Having hop dosing where you're not having to climb up a ladder, go to the top of the tank and dose, dosing into your fermenters, for example. So now you can do it with recirculation, CO2 charging. So those are different ways to alleviate those problems, and you basically innovate a new product to do that. It's both safer, and also we find that because it's mixed properly and infused in there properly, you're using less hops to get the same effect. So there is efficiencies in that as well. Yeast propagation, I think, is another thing that is something that yeast propagators that we do. I'll let you talk a bit more about that, but that's definitely is a unique way that our approach that we have to that.
We've always, with our yeast propagation, developed this back in the 90s, actually, and it was a incremental feed, constant aeration, constant mixing, and things like that. And there's a particular program that we have to work on, and every yeast is a little different as well. So they're tricky things, but you can dial them in, and they work great. I mean, it's significant. Anyway, there's and I was talking about energy savings. Just as simple as CIP systems. A lot of people still manually rinse tanks, manually use, a tank and things like that. And a properly designed and programmed CIP system can save a ton of money, both in chemical use, water use, energy use, all of that. And all that leads into the environment side of things as well. It can save you money, but it's also beneficial. Your effluent is less, your energy costs are down, and the reason why your effluent's less is your water consumption's less. Things like burst rinses and stuff like that. And this isn't new stuff, but it's funny. I've been in a few hundred breweries, and it's funny how a lot of it, hasn't made it out there to a lot of people. Like I've been in breweries where they're rinsing a tank and it's 20 minutes long, and with a non-rotating spray ball, in other words, with a fixed spray ball, you can be upwards of 100 gallons a minute running through the darn thing, and versus a nice rotating one that runs at 20 or 30 GPM. So there's lots of little things like that. And we just got a contract this week for a vapor recovery system on a brewery back east, and it's actually to appease a neighbor. They wanted to not have the smells go next door, but we use it as an opportunity, though, to recover energy. So it's used as an energy recovery device, not so much as a vapor recovery device. So we take the heat we get out of the vapor, and we pump it back into the hot liquor tank. So the savings, they could probably figure it out. I don't know how long the payback is on something like that. The payback for this is instant because now the neighbor's not going to complain. So that's another reason for innovation. But we're running out of time, and there's other things that have come up, like devices. Years ago, a VFD was this weird, wonderful device, a variable frequency drive, and now they're common as hen's teeth. Well, no, I guess that's very uncommon. But anyway, they're everywhere now, and you use them on everything too. But other devices have gotten, when I started in the industry, you could measure in parts per million, which I thought was incredible. Now, parts per billion, probably before I die, it'll be parts per trillion. I don't know, but sensors and devices are things that are used more frequently. Certainly with us, we've used tons of those things now, but we'll see what the future holds here, given this COVID time. But there is more to, in the way of innovation in the brew house, and we're working on half a dozen different things right now that are really interesting. But I'm not going to talk about.
Just in closing, I would say that the properly designed system with the the automation and the devices there, you can definitely reduce energy as well as the initial water usage and effluent water. So those things, and I know people say this all takes money, granted, but it takes a bit of value to put into front, and for your return on investment over the whole project is really what you're going to have to look at, and not just the upfront cost. But I understand there are budgets, and sometimes you can't do it. But as long as you have the plan to initially phase these things in, that is really the way to kind of improve on each of those items.
And some of those are, there are costs, but the savings side sometimes are discounted because it's labor, and I wouldn't discount that. Labor is expensive, and so if you can drive labor out and increase and decrease your cost per barrel, it's money in your pocket.
Looks like we're almost running out of time. Anyways, we had sort of an open talk, and I know there's a question period at the end, and we definitely welcome your questions. Because sometimes it's really hard to talk, but if we have questions, we can answer those, and it's
more specific
stuff. So whether you have you're going to be there in our question period, or if you need to contact us just at Konig, we're if some new product you need designed or anything, or if you just have general questions, we're more than willing to help you out. So anyways,
talk to him. He's way smarter than me.
But I think we're almost out of time. So if there's I guess we can continue talking until we get kicked out of here. So I'd like to touch a bit about I know one of the topics or the pillars that on this talk was diversity, and I would say here's a picture of diversity, for our company, and I think it's always been that way for us. If you say, does our company have a policy? I would say I don't think we need one, because we don't have the issue. If I look all the way from top down to our engineering to our people on the floor, we have all ethnicities. We have women working out as welders. In terms of, so we're hiring based on ability and what they can bring to us as a company, and not on what they look like, what their colors, or what their gender is. And I think,
or what their accent is.
Yeah, exactly. So it's for us. I think diversity has been a very key in making us successful in what we do. So.
It's really helped me over the years. I've been accused of being colorblind. I didn't know what that meant, and then it was explained to me one day, and I went, "Oh, I stand accused." And but I just hired based on talent, and just because they had an accent or they were from a different country or something like that doesn't mean they're not smart. I can tell you that. Some of the smartest people, well, he's a good example. Mind you, Balbir was raised here. He was born in India, but as a child, he was raised here. So he's a little different. But even then, he's one of the smartest guys I know. So hence, that's why